Backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, Nashville, 1969. The kind of darkness that doesn't come from the lights being off, but from everyone waiting. Johnny Cash stands inches from the mirror. His reflection won't stay still. His hands shake, not from nerves, not from fear, from withdrawal. 36 hours without pills. Long enough for the body to revolt. Short enough for temptation to still sound reasonable. An hour ago, Bob Dylan said it without raising his voice, almost casually. "Your lyrics are too simple, John. You're playing it safe." The words haven't stopped echoing since, not because they were cruel, but because they might be true. Johnny looks down at his guitar case. Inside is the instrument that built his name, and hidden beneath it, the pills he swore to June he'd never touch again. The pills that could steady his hands, sharpen his voice, make tonight flawless. Tonight, Dylan will be watching from the wings, the man who never explained himself, the man who just cracked Johnny's foundation with one sentence. Johnny knows this moment won't be remembered for the song he plays. It will be remembered for the choice he makes before he steps on stage. Be perfect, or be honest. And he knows. Only one of those might cost him everything. Let us know where you're watching from. And we hope you enjoy the story. March 1969 arrived without ceremony, the way bad nights usually do. Johnny Cash had been awake for 19 hours, not wired, not high, just stuck inside his own head. 47 days clean. Long enough for the shakes to fade, short enough for fear to stay sharp. At 3:02 a.m., the phone rang. Bob Johnston didn't waste words. "Dylan wants to cut a duet. Tomorrow. Nashville." Johnny sat on the edge of the bed, receiver pressed to his ear, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. They trembled anyway. Fine, almost polite, but constant. Saying no would be easy. Saying yes meant standing in a room with the man every young songwriter was chasing, while Johnny still wasn't sure he trusted himself with a cup of coffee, let alone a microphone. He said yes, because turning down a door like that felt too close to admitting he was finished. Columbia Studio. A smelled like dust, warm cables, and metal that had outlived its owners. The lights were low, not for mood, but because nobody had bothered to replace them. Johnny arrived early. He always did now. Waiting gave him something solid to do with his fear. 2 hours passed. A guitar leaned against the wall, untouched. Engineers avoided eye contact. Johnny wiped his palms on his black slacks and rolled his shoulders, trying to loosen a tension that had lived there for years. When Dylan finally came in, he didn't apologize. He didn't even say hello. He dropped a single sheet of paper on the console like a card on a table and lit a cigarette. "Try this," he said, "if you can." The title sat at the top. Girl from the North Country. Johnny read the first verse, then the second. By the third, something heavy settled in his chest. The words didn't push. They waited. They trusted silence. Against that, his own catalog suddenly felt loud, square, safe. Songs that knew exactly where to stand and never moved. They took their places. Tape rolled. Johnny leaned into the mic and sang. Careful, respectful, trying not to break the song. Halfway through the second verse, his mind slipped. A line vanished. He reached for it and grabbed nothing. Dylan lifted a hand. The tape stopped. No one spoke. Even the cigarette seemed to pause between breaths. "You're thinking too hard about what people expect," Dylan said, not unkindly. "That's why your songs sound like answers instead of questions." Johnny felt it then, clean and precise, like a crack in bone. He'd built a career on delivering what was asked for. Prison songs, promises, lines drawn and held. Hearing that called out, by someone younger, cooler, unafraid, hurt more than the mistake. His hands were slick with sweat now, shoulders locked. He nodded, because arguing would mean admitting the truth out loud. Outside the control room, the city waited, already moving past him. He wondered, for the first time without drugs in the way, whether the world still needed his voice, or whether he'd been singing on borrowed time, mistaking habit for relevance. The tape rewound. Red light blinked again. Johnny closed his eyes, not to disappear, but to stay. The session finally ended after 8 hours that produced almost nothing. 2 usable takes, neither honest enough to keep. When the engineers powered down the room, the silence felt heavier than the music had. Johnny packed his guitar without looking at anyone. His jaw ached from holding it tight all day. At the door, Dylan stopped him. "Come have a drink," he said, like it was an afterthought, like it didn't matter either way. Johnny knew exactly where that sentence could lead. 47 days sober didn't make him brave. It made him exposed. Still, he followed. Walking away would have felt like running, and he was tired of running from rooms. The Bluebird was dim, low-ceilinged, and already half full despite the hour. Smoke clung to the air and to the wood-paneled walls. A jukebox hummed quietly, not playing anything, just alive enough to remind everyone it existed. Dylan ordered whiskey without looking up. Johnny asked for black coffee. The waitress hesitated. Everyone in Nashville knew the story by now. The arrests, the rehab, the promises. She brought the coffee and set it down gently, the way you handle bad news. Dylan took a sip and studied him over the rim of the glass. "Your writing plays it safe," he said. "No edge, no performance. It tells people what they already believe. That's not wrong. But it doesn't move anything." Johnny felt heat rise in his chest. Not shame. Anger. Clean anger. The kind he hadn't trusted himself with in years. His fingers curled against the mug until it burned. "I walk the line," Dylan continued. "Fulsome. Good songs. Solid. But they don't risk anything." The jukebox clicked. Someone laughed at the bar. Johnny barely heard it. He wanted to hit Dylan. The urge surprised him with its clarity. Instead, he raised his hand. "Whiskey," he told the waitress. She froze. Dylan said nothing, just watched. The glass arrived fast. Too fast. Amber liquid, sharp smell. Johnny stared at it. 47 days. June's voice. His daughter's faces. The old promise that one drink was never one drink. He lifted the glass. His hand shook, not from need, but from choice. The room narrowed to that rim, that smell. Then he tipped it, not toward his mouth, but down. The whiskey spilled onto the floor in a slow, deliberate line, soaking into wood that had seen worse nights than this. Johnny didn't look away. "You know what's easy?" he said quietly. "Being complicated so nobody can tell if you're saying anything. Writing around the truth instead of through it. Try writing something simple that still cuts. That's the hard part." For the first time, Dylan smiled. Not warm. Interested. "Then prove it," he said. "Grand Ole Opry. 2 weeks. You go first. Bring the song you're afraid to play." Johnny didn't answer right away. The challenge sat between them, heavier than the empty glass. Finally, he nodded. Not because he was ready, but because he knew he wouldn't survive backing down. Johnny got home after 2 in the morning. The house was dark except for the porch light, which June always left on when she wasn't sure what version of him would walk through the door. She stood in the doorway anyway, robe pulled tight, eyes already asking the question. "Did you drink?" "No," he said. It was the truth, and that mattered more than saying anything else. He didn't tell her about the bar, the spilled whiskey, or the challenge that now sat in his chest like a lodged stone. He kissed her cheek, smelled soap and sleep, and went inside. The next 6 days passed without shape. Johnny sat with his guitar every morning and every night. Strings tuned, fingers ready. Nothing came. When something almost did, it sounded like an echo of himself. Trains, cells, vows he'd already sung better years ago. Each false start tightened the fear. Dylan's words weren't haunting him. The silence was. On the 7th night, reaching into the lining of an old jacket, his fingers touched something small and hard. He pulled it out and knew immediately. One amphetamine tablet, chalk white, nicked at the edge. A survivor from another life. He didn't rush. He sat at the kitchen table with it resting in his palm. June slept upstairs. The house made its quiet nighttime sounds, pipes settling, wood cooling. He remembered how these pills used to open doors in his head, how hours would vanish into motion and certainty. He also remembered the cost. 4 hours passed. The clock read 4:17 a.m. Johnny stood, walked to the bathroom, and placed the tablet on the sink. He took a hammer from under the cabinet. One clean strike. The pill shattered. Powder slid toward the drain. He washed it away and watched until nothing remained. Back in the living room, he picked up the guitar again. This time, he didn't look for an idea. He spoke. About the pill. About the fear of wanting it. About loving June and not trusting himself to stay. The words came uneven, stripped, unprotected. By dawn, there was a song. It didn't feel finished. It felt exposed. He called it redemption, because he didn't know what else to call something that asked for mercy without demanding it. June heard him playing and came downstairs. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was crying, not softly, not politely. "That scares me," he said. "That's why it's true," she answered. For the first time in days, Johnny believed he might have something worth standing behind. Johnny arrived at the Grand Ole Opry at 3 in the afternoon, 4 hours before anyone needed him. The building was quiet in that hollow pre-show way, like it was holding its breath. His guitar case felt heavier than usual, though nothing about it looked different. In the dressing room, the mirrors multiplied the space until it felt smaller. Old bulbs buzzed softly. He set the case on the table and opened it. The guitar lay where it should, but beside it sat a small brown bottle. Johnny didn't touch it at first. He stared, counting his breaths. The label was familiar. Too familiar. When he picked it up, a folded note slid out. "If you break, they're here. If you don't, throw them away yourself. Your call, brother." Always was. Waylon Johnny sat down. This wasn't temptation dressed as kindness. It was a test stripped of excuses. Waylon knew him well enough to know that hiding danger had never helped him. Only facing it did. At 5:15, the door opened without a knock. Dylan stepped in, closed it behind him, and took a seat in the corner. No greeting. "I hear you wrote something new," Dylan said. June mentioned it to Sarah. A pause, long enough to be deliberate. "I did too. Today." Johnny kept tuning his guitar, though it didn't need it. This wasn't camaraderie. This was a line being drawn. Whatever tonight was, it wasn't friendly competition. It was a question of who got to define honesty in front of a room full of people who thought they already knew. Time moved faster after that. At 6:40, voices leaked through the wall. Dylan, an organizer. Low, urgent. "Not sure he's stable. Bad night if something goes wrong. The Opry can't afford." The door opened again. The organizer stepped in, smile strained. "Johnny, if you're not feeling right, we can adjust the order. No pressure." Johnny looked at the bottle, then at the guitar. His hands were steady now, not calm, decided. "I'm going on," he said. "Tell Bob that simple doesn't mean weak." He picked up the bottle and handed it over. "Give this back to Waylon. Tell him I chose." Outside, the crowd began to arrive. The sound crept through the walls. Voices, boots, anticipation. Johnny stood, rolled his shoulders once, and headed for the stage door. Whatever waited out there, he would meet it clean. The lights came up hard and white, flattening the room and turning faces into a single mass. Johnny stepped onto the Grand Ole Opry stage and felt the familiar creak of the old boards under his boots. 2,800 people, close enough to breathe with him. The smell of varnished wood, warm dust, and electricity filled his lungs. He saw June immediately. Front row, hands locked together so tightly the knuckles had gone pale. Just behind the curtain line, he caught Dylan's silhouette. Arms crossed, expression unreadable. Johnny reached the microphone. Tradition demanded a title, maybe a joke. Instead, he let the silence stretch just long enough to make people uneasy. "Earlier," he said, voice low, steady, "a friend told me my songs were too simple. Maybe he's right. But this one wasn't written for critics. I wrote it at 4 a.m, holding something that could have taken me back to hell, and choosing not to." A ripple moved through the hall. Not applause. Attention. He started playing. Redemption didn't unfold cleanly. The first verse landed solid, but the second wavered. A line slipped out of reach, and Johnny filled the space with breath instead of panic. His voice cracked on a word he hadn't expected to hurt. He sang anyway. About the pill on the sink. About being afraid of the man he became when no one was watching. About loving someone more than he trusted himself. In the third row, a woman bowed her head and covered her mouth. Someone else wiped their eyes without trying to hide it. Johnny saw them and nearly stopped, but the song carried him forward, unfinished and alive. When the last chord faded, there was no sound. 3 full seconds. The kind that tells you everything at once. Then the room stood. Applause crashed over him, loud and uncoordinated, like relief. Johnny didn't bow. He didn't smile. He looked past the lights, back toward the wings. Dylan stepped out. Not planned, not announced. The organizers froze. June rose halfway from her seat, unsure. Dylan walked to the mic Johnny still held. He didn't address the crowd. "I was wrong," he said, looking straight at Johnny. "Simplicity that comes from hell isn't weakness. It's the hardest honesty there is." 11 words. Enough. He set his guitar on the stage floor and turned away. "I'm not playing tonight," Dylan told the stunned crew. "After that, anything I do would just be noise." He left the building without another word. Johnny stood alone under the lights, applause still rolling, victory feeling strangely empty. The battle he'd prepared for was gone. What remained was quieter and heavier. They didn't speak on the drive back to the hotel. Not because there was nothing to say, but because saying anything would collapse what was barely standing. Johnny's ears still rang, not from applause, but from the sudden quiet that followed it. June watched the city slide past the window, her hand resting on his knee, grounding without asking questions. The room smelled like stale carpet cleaner and old cigarettes. At 11:45 p.m., Johnny shut the door behind them and leaned against it, exhausted in a way sleep wouldn't touch. On the small desk by the window lay an envelope. No name, no hotel stamp, just paper, waiting. Inside was a handwritten lyric sheet. Dylan's handwriting, tight in places, rushed in others, crossed out lines. ink smudges where the pen had pressed too hard. The title sat crooked at the top. The Weight of Simple Truth. Johnny read slowly. The song wasn't about him, not directly. It was about a man who hid behind clever turns of phrase, who built walls out of language because silence scared him more than lies. The last verse stopped Johnny cold. I built a maze of words to hide slash, but simplicity found me inside. June watched his face change as he folded the paper back into the envelope. Morning came too soon. At 7:23, the phone rang. Bob Johnston's voice was tight with excitement. "Turn on WSM, now!" The radio crackled to life. A calm announcer, choosing words carefully. Johnny Cash's performance. Bob Dylan's statement. The phrase, public acknowledgement, slipped through the static. Then another update. Dylan had left Nashville overnight. No forwarding number, no explanation. One quote confirmed, "I need time to rethink what I've been doing." Johnny sat on the edge of the bed, radio humming, feeling oddly hollow. He tried calling Dylan's hotel, Columbia, friends, nothing. On the third day, a telegram arrived. 3 lines, all caps, brutal in their simplicity. "John, stop your song, broke something in me. Stop, thank you. Stop." Johnny read it once, then again, then sat for 40 minutes without moving. When June found him, his face was wet, not collapsed, not ashamed. Clean. "I thought I proved something to him," Johnny said. "Turns out he showed me something instead." That night, Waylon called. His voice carried no humor. "Those pills," he said. "They weren't my idea." Johnny closed his eyes. "Bob asked me," Waylon continued. "Said if you could turn them down, maybe he could turn himself down. His ego, his armor. He wasn't testing you, John. He was looking for proof." The room went quiet. All of it, the challenge, the cruelty, the restraint, fell into place. It hadn't been a duel. It had been 2 men using the same fire to burn different cages open. Johnny folded the telegram and placed it beside Dylan's lyrics. For the first time since the Opry, the noise inside him settled, not into triumph, but into something steadier, understanding. 6 months later, Johnny drove north without telling anyone why. October had already stripped the trees near Woodstock down to their bones, leaving the road pale and honest. The cafe sat off the highway, too small for secrets, quiet enough to keep them. Dylan was there first, thinner, older in the face. He stood when Johnny entered, then sat again, unsure what to do with his hands. "I haven't written a song in half a year," Dylan said once the coffee arrived. No preamble. "First time since I can remember." He let that settle. "But I learned how to listen. Not wait my turn, actually listen." From his jacket, he pulled a cassette. No label. "Your song from the Opry. I played it 47 times. Not because it's clever. Because it doesn't hide." He slid a small notebook across the table. Pages bent. Lines scratched out. Rewritten. Abandoned. Dozens of beginnings that refused to finish. Attempts at plain language that left nowhere to stand. "When you strip everything away," Dylan said, eyes fixed on the window, "what's left is you. And I wasn't sure I wanted to meet that man." Johnny read one fragment aloud. A verse about losing relevance, about complexity as armor. He closed the notebook. "Finish it," Johnny said. "People need to hear that from you." Dylan was quiet for a long moment. "That sentence I said to you on stage," he finally admitted. "I didn't plan it. It just came out. Afterward, I couldn't breathe. Not panic, release. Like I didn't have to be the sharpest mind in the room anymore." He looked back at Johnny. "I envied you. Not the fame. The courage to be simple without apologizing. Johnny nodded, then spoke of something he'd never said aloud. About the night he crushed the pill at 4:17 a.m. About not thinking of challenges or rivals, but of his daughter, Roseanne, asking why he wrote about prisoners instead of home. "I was writing about them because I was one," Johnny said. Admitting that meant admitting I'd failed her. He met Dylan's eyes. "That song wasn't for you. It was for her. To show her freedom is a choice you make again and again." Dylan reached for his guitar. "I finished the song," he said. "This morning." He played. 3 verses. No tricks. Just truth. He taught me simple takes more strength than complicated ever could. When it ended, Johnny said only, "Now you're free." A month later, Johnny recorded, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." Redemption sat quietly among the tracks. In the liner notes, one line, "For Bob, who showed me the courage to admit I was wrong." Dylan never released his song. Years later, when asked who shaped him most, he answered simply, "Johnny Cash. He taught me how much truth one sentence can carry." In Dylan's archive, the cassette from April 1969 remains. On the cover, handwritten, "The night I learned to be simple."